Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. When the blazing sun is gone, when the nothing shines upon, then you show your little light. Twinkle, twinkle all the night. Then the traveler in the dark thanks you for your little spark. He could not see which way to go. If you though I know not what you are, twinkle, twinkle, little star.
A little known fact about me. I am a huge fan of the horror genre. It is one of my absolute favorites in current media. Nothing gets me more pumped than a good scare with the lights off late at night and questioning whether or not that was the right choice before going to bed. From movies to video games, it's no secret that many have left an impact on the genre that continues to inspire for generations. From Resident Evil to Silent Hill, the list could go on, but that'd be a whole other topic. But of all the different subgenres that it helped create, one of my favorites happens to be cosmic horror, or, more specifically, sci-fi horror. Space, in and of itself, is a mystery to us. The concept that we don't know what's beyond our planet and our own solar system is already a terrifying thought. With the right talent and ingenuity, this fear can be exploited into a unique, frightening experience. The first one that comes immediately to mind is the Alien franchise. For video games, however, I'd say one of the best examples is Dead Space, which leads to the game in question. After the disaster of Dead Space 3, hope began to dwindle for the franchise. But back in 2019, Glenn Schofield, the creative director of Dead Space, would go to found Striking Distance Studios, in which they would announce their first game in 2020. The game that he would go on to say was what Dead Space was originally going to be. Enter the Callisto Protocol. Since its announcement, excitement soared to the high heavens. With some of the crew who created the original Dead Space at the helm, people were excited for the newest Dead Space successor that will put the sci-fi horror genre back on the map. It did not become the Dead Space successor people wanted. With a bad PC port, weak performances on other platforms, coupled with low review scores, Callisto Protocol's initial reception was not good, to put it lightly. However, I'd say about a month into the game's release, and when the discourse had died down and the patches rolled in, I decided to check it out for myself, as I was still interested and optimistic about it in some way. It's safe to say, I came to two conclusions about this game. The first one being that I was right to come to my own conclusions about it, as I had an amazing time with Callisto Protocol. If you liked Dead Space, I guarantee you'll have a fun time with this one. But at the same time, however, I came with the other conclusion that it both is and isn't Dead Space at the same time. It borrows from its predecessor, but also adds new aspects that makes it its own entity, and it manages to work rather well. But I wanted to talk about this game simply because not only do I feel as though that the bad reception that it got wasn't exactly deserved, I mean, aside from the PC port, that had every right to be criticized, but also because I want this IP to continue in some way. I believe there's a lot of potential for not only just a successor to Dead Space, but also to have it grow in a way that it allows it to coexist with it. That is my mission, to explain why I hold this game in high regard. So let's take a journey through Black Iron Prison and explore its dark secrets together. Join me, as this is my love letter to the Callisto Protocol.
Welcome to Black Iron Prison.
You know they call Callisto the dead moon. dead.
So we're going on a bit of a tangent with this one, and I'm gonna move the order around a little bit, as I want to talk about what is easily the most important aspect of any horror game: the establishment of atmosphere and tone. In any horror game, atmosphere is everything. You want your audience to feel uneasy, afraid, and keep the player on their toes at all times. If a horror game can't achieve that, the rest of the experience won't have that kind of real impact that it's looking for. I mean, if you're not able to get your audience to collectively shit their pants, would you really call that a horror game?
Okay, game, if you can hear me, fuck you.
However, most realize that fear is also subjective, that some games are scarier to others than the typical average human, so it is difficult to get the right kind of fear out of the individual. That being said, however, I love the atmosphere of Callisto Protocol. Callisto Protocol's atmosphere is one of oppressiveness, and the feeling that you are trapped with no real way out. That just when you think you escaped, you always come back to Black Iron Prison. The game's usage of lighting and camera work is also extremely effective at making the player feel uneasy and always wary of what comes next. The way that the facility continues to degrade and get worse the longer the player stays and the infection spreads is also a really nice touch. A perfect example of this is at the beginning of the game, you find yourself in the bathrooms, and it's eerily quiet, not a creature or survivor in sight. The longer you stay there, and just as you collect what it has to offer, as soon as you turn around, the lights all go out, and the monsters come out from underneath your feet and into the darkness. Wow, talk about having another reason not to drop the soap. Callisto does an amazing job at making you feel vulnerable and always weary of your surroundings, and it helps the player realize that survivability is paramount. To give you an idea, we have these security robots that still remain active around the prison. These bots are practically unkillable and are one-shot kills on any difficulty if you get in their line of sight, so you prioritize remaining hidden and waiting for the right moment to escape. You'll end up doing that quite a bit, or at least I had to. It doesn't help that with all of this, the game's visuals and graphics are absolutely breathtaking. From the character models to the levels and biomes, Striking Distance Studios did a wonderful job capturing the horrors of what goes on in Callisto, which also helps really capture the tone. By far, the most frightening sequence I can think of is when you finally are on the surface of Callisto. The snow rolls in, and you can see an ominous storm in the distance, trying to illuminate an already pitch-black darkness. At one point, the storm perfectly lights the watchtower for you to see, as it's your next destination. Just such a fantastic visual display on the game's part. As you explore the abandoned outpost outside, the monsters can be seen frozen solid, with no chance of moving. This in turn freaks out the player and forces them into either a fight or flight response. And, being the little scared bitch that I can be, I ended up making sure I break every damn one of them, till you find out that some of them will come out going, "Life has many doors, Ed boy!" and come out to pounce at you. Callisto Protocol is filled with encounters like this. Be it underwater, or creatures climbing the walls, there's always something in the dead moon of Callisto waiting for you. So with that out of the way, now we're going into the meat and potatoes of this game, the combat. This is what divided people in a bunch of ways, but it's also where a lot of the comparisons to Dead Space begin to show its colors. In a strange way, however, it manages to take those similarities and turn the formula on its head, with the primary focus being on melee combat, because it's nice to beat the absolute tar out of the monsters that have a knack for doing the same thing to you, as well as caving your fucking face in like a clay doll. The best way I can describe Callisto Protocol's combat is that it's almost like a fighting game, where it's easy to learn, but difficult to master. The foundation is all there, but how you work around it is what makes it interesting. You got your standard melee weapons, along with a slew of guns you collect over the course of the game. The melee combat is as follows. You have your standard attacks, a dodge mechanic where you move the left stick either left or right and you dodge automatically no matter what, as well as an auto lock-on to the creature's appendages to get an easy shot in. There's also stealth, where you can be able to instantly kill the foe or help crawl down vents. With this as your foundation, it's up to the player to master this formula, as the game constantly throws curveballs on the player. It also helps that it's just really satisfying to pull off. The combat has a lot of weight and hits register well, and the guns have a lot of kick and knockback that showcases their power. The guns also have this unique trait where they're relegated to schematics and grips, and they have 2 specific grips to swap out the individual weapon for the fight at hand. It's a pretty neat touch. These guns consist of the standard hand cannon, the tactical pistol, which harbors more ammo and less damage, the skunk gun, which is a shotgun pistol, and honestly it's a fitting name as it is a nasty powerful weapon, the riot gun, which is a standard shotgun, and an assault rifle. I call it an assault rifle because the terms burst and rifle put together does not fill me with much confidence. Next, we have the beautiful GRP gauntlet, or grip. It basically acts like a mix of the stasis and kinesis modules from Dead Space, which is really cool. It can be used to pick up objects, lift up heavier objects to move them out of the way, break open vents, and the best feature of it all, picking up and throwing monsters at a far distance. And then of course on top of all of this is the little core device on your neck that this prison just so lovingly planted into you. You can replenish this by collecting health injectors or health packs scattered around the prison. Also scattered around Black Iron Prison are ammo for your guns, chests that carry more items, and credits that you can spend in what is easily my favorite thing in the entire game, the UJC 3D printer. This thing is basically like the safe rooms in Left 4 Dead or the safe rooms in Resident Evil 7. They don't solve everything, but boy is it a blessing from God when it's there. This printer is your go-to for upgrades, buying ammo, or even additional health injectors. And you will need this printer every time you find one. Ammunition is scarce, especially on the higher difficulties, so resource management is key. Now, the choice is you can use the credits to either buy more ammo, focus on upgrading your baton, your grip, or your guns, or buy extra health injectors or battery packs for your grip. Some of these upgrades include making the monsters an amputee, or giving your guns an extended mag. This also helps when you can pick up energy converters or other printers to sell for extra credit. This printer is your friend. This printer is your life. Now with all this put together, I only have 2 real gripes with the combat, specifically the melee combat. The first one being the lack of weapon variety. All you have is the stun baton. You do get a pickaxe at the beginning of the game, but later on, once you find the stun baton, he ditches that pickaxe faster than Sony blacklists people for even criticizing their games. I just kind of wish there were more weapons that your character can use, but it's more of a nitpick than anything else. Now, the second problem, however, I say is more prominent and worth mentioning, is that when more than one of these creatures can come at you at the same time, the character will have a hard time trying to combat the 2 of them, and you just end up getting swarmed, and it's not as fun. But the majority of this is answered with what I consider to be the combat's greatest strength. Its enemy variety, its enemy encounter variety, and its level design. All 3 of these work in tandem and adjust how you play the game to an incredible degree. Let's talk about the enemy variety first. The biophage. It's not as massive as, say, Dead Space's enemy variety, but each of the biophage all have incredible designs. The body horror is on full display here. Their gameplay mechanics also not only stick to the main combat formula, but also have unique ways of approaching you as well as you approaching them. You have your standard grunts, which serve as your basic enemies. They are in-your-face aggressive and will constantly want to come after you, and they also have different looks, like, say, wearing body armor for further toughness, and behavioral patterns, so be careful. Then there's the bloodworm that comes out of hive pods, like your own personal facehugger, and will latch on and pull you in for a late night snack. Big heads are bigger lumbering biophage that spit projectiles at you and prefer to stay far away, but if you get close to them, these guys hit like a truck and can knock you on your ass. Corruptors are one of the creepier biophage, as they prefer to climb on walls and turn invisible, so that they can have the right opportune moment to hide in the shadows and pin you down, or pounce towards you. Combustors are very slow crawlers that are explosive, but they can be picked up with the grip and be used against other biophage, so they're not the hardest to fight. However, my two favorite biophage are the Blind and the Two-Headed Brute. The Two-Headed Brute is the more fun encounter, as they are a genuinely great threat in a fight. And let me tell you, when I say you want to stay as far away from them at all times, they are aggressive, and you can only shoot at them, as melee combat against these guys are a guaranteed death sentence, especially when these brutes on the highest difficulty are a one-shot kill. You must keep moving and steer clear of their massive swings, as they are relentless and require precise shots to knock them down. They are super intimidating and really fun to fight, especially when halfway through, when you do knock them down, they will tear off a part of their body so they don't slow themselves down. But the most terrifying encounter of the two is the Blind. These guys function much like the clickers from The Last of Us, where they can only hear but they cannot see. So stealth is the main focus with taking them down, as long as you hang low to the ground. That way, the Blind don't take your eyes. What makes these guys so terrifying is just the sheer number of them in each locale. They are everywhere and are constantly on your ass more often than not. So it just becomes a race of whether or not you can stay quiet, as if at least one of them notices you, they will be set off and you just shit yourself. And to make matters worse, these biophage can come out of the walls without warning, adding more to the fear factor. So at one point, if all of them decide to come out at once, you just gave them an open invitation to your eyeballs. It's a terrifying encounter, and probably my favorite section in the game, honestly. And as if all of that wasn't enough, the biophage can also mutate to become stronger. So, yeah, there's that. But the biggest strength of all the biophage is the encounter variety and Callisto Protocol's level design. So imagine if you took the easy to learn, hard to master formula and the enemy variety given, all while managing to expand upon it by making each enemy encounter or level your own personal playground. Each area in the prison has traps and environmental elements littered everywhere that can be used to your advantage, like say spikes, giant fans, or grinders to turn the biophage into mincemeat. Which, I'm sorry, I have to say this, what kind of prison has traps like this? Did they take architecture lessons from Jigsaw? Okay, rant over. The level design is phenomenal. It encourages variety into how you approach the upcoming onslaught, and it makes the combat fresh every time, as you can make it harder or easier for yourself. Here's an example. You see, you got 4 to 5 grunts, a big head, a fan to your right, and a big grinder in the middle. With time, you go in there and realize you can basically grip the biophage into the fans. With more time, however, you realize you can stealth kill one, shoot 2 more, throw a couple in the grinder, and beat the shit out of the other. And with even more time, you realize that some creatures can be killed easily, like the Blind can be shot at while they're on the walls as it insta-kills them, and if you're quick enough, bloodworms can be one-shot before they latch on you. There's so much variety to the enemy encounters and levels in Callisto Protocol. The replay value for me was immense, as I couldn't put it down, because I was always able to find ways to fight the biophage. The level designs help out as well, because the interconnectivity of each area is Dark Souls levels of fun. It rewards you for backtracking and checking literally every nook and cranny of Black Iron. It is so good. The gameplay of Callisto Protocol in so many areas is extremely satisfying and has so much replay value that I would go back and play again and again and get something new each and every time. Oh, and the death animations? Not gonna lie, they're gross. They're gross. Okay, let's move on. Oh, I'm gonna be sick. And lastly, let's get into the story, because there is a lot I have to say about it. Mostly positive, however, there is one thing that ruins almost the entirety of the story as a whole. I want you to remember that I said this. But if you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and jump into this timestamp, as there is a lot to talk about. Alrighty, let's do this. It starts off with an outbreak that has happened on the planet of Europa by supposedly a group by the name of the Outer Way. As the news goes out, you take control of Jacob Lee, a pilot of the ship the UJC Charon, transporting supplies from Europa to Callisto and back and forth. Your partner, Max, feels that this entire ordeal is somewhat shady, especially with added security at Callisto. Jacob is honestly always trying to reassure him during this, because, I mean, hey, what's the worst that could happen?
Explosive decompression on cargo bay.
Oops.
After an attack by the Outer Way, your ship crashes on Callisto, your first officer dies in the crash, just a flesh wound, and Black Iron picks you up while simultaneously taking you and a woman named Danny into custody per the warden's request. As you are taken into custody, an outbreak gets let loose within the prison, allowing you to break out and have an opportunity to escape Black Iron Prison and off of this dead moon, all while simultaneously finding out what caused the outbreak and the darker secrets of the UJC. With the help of audio logs and video logs, you see more and more the effects and the fallout of what happened here, which makes Jacob, and by extension you, more curious. Before we continue, I have to talk about the cast because it's surprisingly one of the most interesting casts I've come across. We have Jacob, played by Josh Duhamel of Transformers fame. Danny is played by the Boys actress Karen Fukuhara, and easily one of my favorite voice acting legends of our generation, of Star Wars fame, Sam Witwer, and you've got a cast that pulled my interest faster than you could say Kenobi. He plays Captain Ferris, who takes you into custody and basically tells you to let go of your old life. Let go of what it used to be. You're in my world now, not your world. Sorry, I have to do that. And I swear, he just eats up every aspect of the scenery that he is in. Every time he's on screen, it is some of the most fun I can tell he's having.
You. How the fuck did you get in here?
You think I got time for this shit? Okay. Let me see if I got this straight. You crash here, and then this whole place goes to shit. Oh, 5, 2, 1. Look at me when I'm talking to you. What'd you do? Huh? You can tell me. Are you different? Are you special? Why'd the warden? Why'd you lie?
It also doesn't help that his dialogue is actually pretty damn awesome.
I mean, shit. As far as anyone else is concerned, you are dead. It's time you moved on. Because you're crossing over to a new kingdom. No. My kingdom.
Anyways, as you continue to make your way out of the prison, you meet a prisoner by the name of Elias. He helps you throughout the majority of the start of the story. As you continue to make your way out, and Ferris gets off-screen, which I will talk about later, you go to this massive shoe where some of the worst criminals are kept, and Elias needs one particular person that can help on their plans to escape. Turns out, it was Danny that he needed, and while they're trying to work together to escape, Danny tells Elias to not trust him. Jacob makes it to the Habitat Dome later down the line, so they can get to the hangar quicker. They gear up to head outside on the moon, and we get this, honestly, pretty great scene between Elias and Jacob.
I never asked you. What are you in for?
What? You worried you're helping a murderer escape?
Well, yeah, kinda.
Well, you are, man. So what? Look, it was a long time ago, yeah? I was defending myself. Wrong place, wrong time. I made a lot of bad decisions back then.
Yeah, well, you were probably just dealt a shitty hand.
No. No. I was used to blame everyone else. But then I realized this was on me. You can't keep running from what you've done.
Oh, hi, Mark.
There's always a price to pay.
There's always a price to pay. You cannot run from what you've done. The overall theme and importance of the plot. Remember those words. After you get ejected from the station and Elias unfortunately dies, you come across Danny again.
What's up, bitch?
You two are then forced to work together so you both can escape at the hangar. But before then, Danny decides to make a detour to your crashed ship because he's still suspicious of you and the cargo that you carried. This is where I believe the story truly shines, in these two characters. The way they work off of each other and the way they learn more about each other makes their motivations more and more clear. Danny is determined to crush the UJC and learn the truth about the outbreak on Europa and the UJC's involvement. Meanwhile, Jacob just wants to be able to escape, as he doesn't know why he's here and why he was taken in, all while he's completely losing it mentally. As they make it to the hangar, the warden stops you in your tracks, shoots down the ship, and after a Dead Space 2 type segment, you travel deeper underground the moon into Arcus and the colony, an underground civilization that suffered an outbreak 75 years ago, just exactly like what happened in Black Iron Prison, as well as the attack on Europa. How strange. You then come across this dome that contains a huge, dead alien that crashed on Callisto many years ago, and it contains the same biophage infection, in the same cargoes boxes that you shipped. But, well, boring conversation anyway, we got company!
5, 2, 1. You and me, we got some unfinished business.
Go to hell.
We could talk. Oh my God! What's wrong with your face?
Notice how little we see of Ferris? That's honestly his biggest issue. He's one of the coolest parts of the story, so much so that I wish he was around more. He's unfortunately always behind the scenes and is not really on screen all that much. But don't worry, it all comes together for the most part anyway. After you survive your encounter with Ferris, it's unfortunately too late. Danny is infected. So now, it's all up to you to stop the warden and still find a way to escape. But before you could be able to react,
Surprise, motherfucker!
two of the robots take you back to your cells. You always come back, don't you? But fear not. Dr. Caitlin Mahler, one of the architects of the outbreak, is here to help, and helps you get to her lab where she reveals the main purpose of the outbreak. The warden, Duncan Cole, wanted to recreate the original outbreak from 75 years ago, originally from Arcus, to bring back Subject Zero as Subject Alpha, the next step in human evolution. All that mumbo-jumbo. This is also where you find out that the doctor can help create an antidote for Danny's condition. You just need the blood of the Alpha. That, and by syncing with Danny's core device, is where you learn the truth about the attack on Europa.
Look at it! Look at it!
What are you talking about?
You see? Do you see?
Jacob, what do you got there? What we got here is none of our business. Now, come on. We've got a job to do.
It was you. You cannot run from what you've done. There's always a price to pay.
It wasn't a terrorist attack. They doctored the footage to cover up what they were planning to test at Black Iron. And the cargo that we transported played a part in both. I could have stopped this. But I didn't.
Your choices led you here. Now how are you going to rectify it? By going to speak to their manager. You finally come face to face with Duncan Cole for the antidote to save Danny. But he gives you the final part of this grand protocol, this grand test, to face his Alpha. That's right, Captain Ferris was his Alpha. This was his kingdom all along. And after you face off against him in a pretty okay boss fight, to be honest, as he goes full Resident Evil on your ass, you then get his blood to synthesize an antidote and save Danny. You You then make it to the escape pods, but there's only one left. So, in a last-ditch effort, he throws Danny in it so that she can escape and expose the UJC while he stays behind. He does belong here. He cannot run from what he's done, so he chooses to stay instead. One life was saved, and that was enough for him. Now, I show all of this in as much detail as possible to remind you. Remember that one thing I said that almost ruins the entirety of the story as a whole? Well, this isn't how the game ends. This is.
Jacob, there might be a way out after all.
Reactor core temporary safeties activated.
But I'm going to need your help.
I cannot put into words how much I hated this one scene. This one scene alone completely counteracts the entirety of the themes of the story and Jacob's character. He has just come to terms with the fact that he does belong here and that he cannot run from what he has done. And now you're gonna tell me that the doctor has now magically found out a way for Jacob to escape? What? All for what? A sequel bait? For future DLC? You already had a perfect ending to this game. Why add more unnecessary shit to an ending to a character whose arc is already complete? So now, instead, I'm left with more questions than I have answers. Now, instead of wondering how Danny is going to be able to expose the UJC for what they've done, now I'm left with the question: how in God's name can they continue Jacob's story? Which is so disappointing how much the story just feels incomplete now. Look, listen. The thing is, I'm fine with credit scenes like this so long as it doesn't stifle the plot momentum and as long as it makes sense. But this was a terrible decision. A flat out, find out next time on Dragon Ball Z type ending. And with the most recent announcement for the next expansion, the final transmission, coming out on the 29th, maybe the question will be answered. Or at least I hope it will. And it is such a damn shame, because do not let this discourage you, because I absolutely love this story. I love the characters, I love the lore, I love the dialogue, I love it all. That's why it's just so important to stick that landing. And it just doesn't. And that is the Callisto Protocol. A game that, despite the gripes that I do have, I absolutely love, and I don't think it deserved the backlash that it got. If I could describe the game in one word, it's misunderstood. Because there's so much that it gets right than it gets wrong, and it's a really unique and fun survival horror game. It borrows from Schofield's previous game, Dead Space, but at the same time though, it's not Dead Space. Nor did it need to be. It takes the foundation and elevates it to it becomes its own thing, which is what every developer should do with their IPs. They're constantly adding new content, mostly free for players like New Game Plus, Hardcore mode, and Dismemberment mode. Even adding a new Riot Horde mode for $10, which I highly recommend you guys play more than once. It is really awesome and worth your time. And I can constantly say that they add new content because every time it looks like I can relax from this game, it's that Captain Ferris is constantly putting a gun to my head telling me to play more of it. Please send help, this is not a joke. And as mentioned before, the final transmission is coming eventually, and I will be covering that as a follow-up. Honestly though, my one and only hope is that Striking Distance Studios continues to expand upon this universe and continues to use this IP in the future. There's so much intrigue and so much going for it that if the right cards are played, they can do so much to the point where it can coexist with Dead Space. We're talking going from Dead Space 1 to Dead Space 2 levels of quality. Unfortunately though, it didn't sell well initially, which sucks. So, chances of it having any kind of staying power is definitely put into question right now. But whether or not this becomes a franchise, only time will tell. But there is a lot of room for improvement, and a lot of potential for something phenomenal. And this, I believe, was the stepping stone. So let's see if they continue to walk. And that is my love letter to the Callisto Protocol.
Am I so lost again? If there's no way back, is this all I have? If I'm alive, been lost again, given everything, when I'll never win, I'll close my eyes, 'cause the world outside is going under. You know I died. I would leave this life to find another. If there's a universe, even one reality, where I'm enough for me.